Welcome, family, to Ironwad Whispers. This is your corner for stories that take you on journeys filled with emotion, surprises, and heart. Before we begin, drop a comment with where you're listening from. I'd love to see our community connect worldwide. And if you haven't yet, hit like and subscribe so you never miss a story. Now, settle in and enjoy. Once upon a time, a billionaire married a rebellious girl on a reckless bet. He thought it was just a cruel game, certain she'd never matter. But on their wedding night, one dark secret exploded, and the truth left him stunned, powerless, and forever changed. Churchill West stood on the terrace of his Malibu estate, watching the sun dip below the Pacific horizon as he swirled his aged whiskey. At 34, he had built West Energy Solutions from a small solar panel startup into a renewable energy empire worth $12 billion. His clean energy patents had revolutionized the industry. His wind farms dotted 3 continents, and his revolutionary battery storage systems powered entire cities. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, he was about to make the stupidest decision of his life, all because his 3 closest friends thought he'd gone soft. "You've become predictable, Church," Marcus Chen had said at their monthly poker game. "When's the last time you did something that wasn't calculated down to the decimal point? When's the last time you took a real risk?" The others had joined in, especially his best friend since college, David Rothman, who'd bet him $1 million that he couldn't do something truly spontaneous. "Marry the next woman who tells you to go to hell," David had laughed, drunk on expensive scotch. "I dare you. Hell, I'll make it 5 million if you actually go through with it." Churchill, his competitive nature ignited and his judgment clouded by his own alcohol consumption, had accepted. 2 weeks later, Amelia Thorne had crashed into his life like a hurricane hitting the coast. He'd been at a charity gala in Santa Barbara, the kind of stuffy event where everyone pretended to care about ocean conservation while networking furiously. She'd been working as a bartender, her purple-streaked hair and numerous piercings standing out like neon signs among the conservative crowd. When he'd approached the bar and tried to cut in front of the line with his usual, "Do you know who I am?" routine, she'd looked him dead in the eye and said, "Yeah, you're the asshole who thinks his money makes him special. Go to hell and wait your turn like everyone else." The entire bar area had gone silent. Churchill West, the man who could buy and sell small countries, had just been dressed down by a bartender who couldn't be older than 25. Instead of anger, he'd felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine amusement and intrigue. "Marry me," he'd said impulsively, remembering the bet. She'd laughed in his face. "Right, because every girl dreams of marrying an entitled prick who can't even wait in line for a drink." But Churchill was nothing if not persistent, and what started as a bet quickly became an obsession. For the next month, Churchill pursued Amelia with the same single-minded determination he'd used to build his empire. He learned she was 26, had dropped out of art school to care for her sick grandmother, and worked 3 jobs to pay off medical debts. She rode a motorcycle, had a tattoo sleeve depicting Van Gogh's Starry Night morphing into a punk rock concert, and volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends. She was everything his usual type wasn't: chaotic where they were controlled, genuine where they were calculated, fierce where they were demure. "What's your game?" Amelia had asked on their 5th accidental meeting at the coffee shop where she worked mornings. "Billionaires don't just randomly pursue bartenders. Is this some pretty woman fantasy? Because I'm not interested in being anyone's project." Churchill had surprised himself by being honest. "You told me to go to hell. No one's done that in 10 years. I find it refreshing." What he didn't tell her was about the bet, or how what started as a joke had become something more. He was fascinated by her refusal to be impressed by his wealth, her dedication to her grandmother, the way she called him out on his bullshit without hesitation. Their first real date had been a disaster by conventional standards, but perfect by any other measure. She'd insisted on taking him to a food truck festival in East LA where his Armani suit stood out like a sore thumb. She'd laughed when he didn't know how to eat a proper street taco, taught him to play pool in a dive bar, and ended the night by spray painting an abandoned warehouse with him. "This is illegal," he'd pointed out, even as he helped her create a mural of a phoenix rising from solar panels. "So is half of what your corporate lawyers do. But that doesn't seem to bother you," she'd shot back, and he'd kissed her right there, covered in paint and feeling more alive than he had in years. The proposal had been equally unconventional. 3 months after they met, during one of their arguments about capitalism versus artistic integrity, Churchill had pulled out a ring made from recycled aluminum and lab-grown diamonds. "Marry me," he'd said. "Not because you told me to go to hell, not because you're different, but because you're the only person who sees Churchill, not just West Energy Solutions." Amelia had stared at him for a long moment before saying, "You're insane." "You barely know me." "I know enough," he'd replied. "I know you sing Nirvana songs to your grandmother when she's having bad days. I know you name every stray cat at the shelter. I know you're the only person who's ever made me want to be better." She'd said yes, but only after making him promise to donate $1 million to her grandmother's nursing home. The wedding planning had been a battle of wills. Churchill's assistant had tried to organize a massive society event, but Amelia had threatened to elope to Vegas if she saw one more ice sculpture sample. They'd compromised on a beach ceremony in Big Sur with only 50 guests, though Churchill had insisted on flying everyone in on his private jets. Amelia had worn a vintage dress she'd found in a thrift store and customized herself, adding LED lights to the hem that twinkled like stars. Churchill had never seen anything more beautiful. "You sure about this?" David had asked him the morning of the wedding, holding the $5 million check he'd written as a joke. You could still back out. Tell her about the bet, give her a settlement, move on. But Churchill had torn up the check. It stopped being about the bet the moment she threw paint at me for suggesting we use my connections to get her art in galleries. "I love her, David. God help me. I actually love her." David had studied his friend's face, seeing something there he'd never seen before. Genuine happiness. "Then I wish you the best, man. Just maybe don't ever tell her about the bet." The ceremony had been perfect in its imperfection. Amelia's grandmother, wheelchair-bound but fierce, had given her away. Churchill's board of directors sat awkwardly next to Amelia's artist friends and fellow bartenders. Her vows had included promises to always call him on his bougie bullshit and to never let him become a corporate robot. His had included promises to support her art, to remember that money wasn't everything, and to always wait his turn at bars. When they kissed, sealing their unlikely union, the sunset had painted the sky in shades of pink and gold that no amount of money could have arranged. The reception had been a study in contrasts. Amelia's friends performed an impromptu punk rock set, while Churchill's business associates looked on in bewilderment. The wedding cake was a 3-tiered masterpiece, decorated to look like a graffitied wall, complete with edible spray paint cans. Churchill had surprised Amelia by having her grandmother's favorite jazz quartet flown in from New Orleans, and watching the old woman's face light up had made Amelia cry. "You're not who I thought you were," she'd whispered to Churchill as they danced. "Neither are you," he'd replied, and meant it. As the evening wound down, Churchill found himself actually nervous about the wedding night. Not for the usual reasons. They'd been together physically for weeks, but because marriage suddenly felt real in a way the bet never had. He'd married this wild, unpredictable woman who challenged everything about his orderly life, And tomorrow they'd wake up as husband and wife. The thought thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. Amelia seemed to sense his mood, squeezing his hand as they said goodbye to their guests. "Having second thoughts, Mr. West?" she'd asked. "Never, Mrs. West," he'd replied, surprised to find he meant it. The wedding suite at the Ventana Big Sur had been Amelia's one concession to luxury, mainly because Churchill had begged. As they entered, she kicked off her lead-lit heels and flopped onto the bed with a laugh. "We actually did it. We got married. My grandmother is probably planning our babies' names already." Churchill loosened his tie, watching his new wife with a mixture of affection and amazement. She'd pulled her purple-streaked hair out of its elaborate updo, and makeup was smudged around her eyes, but she looked perfect to him. "Any regrets?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Ask me in the morning," she said, but her smile was warm. "I need to tell you something," Amelia said suddenly, sitting up. Her whole demeanor had changed, the playful bride replaced by someone serious and almost fragile. "I should have told you before, but I was scared you'd change your mind." Churchill felt his stomach drop. This was it, the moment when he learned what he'd actually gotten himself into. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it together," he said, taking her hand. She laughed, but it was bitter. "You say that now, but you don't know. God, I don't even know how to start." Amelia stood and walked to the window, staring out at the dark ocean. "You know how I told you I dropped out of art school to take care of my grandmother?" Churchill nodded, though she couldn't see him. "That was true, but it's not the whole truth. I also dropped out because I was recruited by the FBI. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Churchill's mind raced, trying to process what he was hearing. "You're what? A federal agent?" Amelia turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. "Not anymore. I quit 2 years ago. But Church, I was assigned to investigate West Energy Solutions." The room seemed to spin around Churchill. His wife, the woman he'd just married, the woman he'd fallen in love with, had been investigating his company. "For what?" he managed to ask, his voice surprisingly steady. "Corporate espionage, environmental violations, tax evasion. My handler was convinced you were dirty, that no one could build an empire that fast without cutting corners." She wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara further. "I spent 6 months undercover at one of your subsidiaries before I quit. You want to know what I found?" Churchill couldn't speak, so he just nodded. "Nothing," Amelia said. "Absolutely nothing illegal. You were exactly what you claimed to be. A brilliant businessman who actually gave a damn about the environment. Your employees loved you. Your practices were above board. And you were paying more taxes than required, just to, and I quote from your own memo, contribute fairly to society." I couldn't believe it. My handler couldn't believe it. He wanted me to dig deeper, to find something, anything. That's when I quit. I couldn't investigate someone for the crime of being successful while actually trying to save the planet. She laughed bitterly. "Then 2 years later you walk up to my bar, and I tell you to go to hell without even recognizing you." The universe has a sick sense of humor. Churchill's mind was reeling, but one question pushed to the forefront. "Did you know who I was? When we started dating? Did you know?" Amelia nodded miserably. "I recognized you the second time you showed up at the coffee shop. I should have run, should have quit and moved to another city. But I was curious. The man I'd investigated on paper was nothing like the entitled ass who'd tried to cut in line. I wanted to know which one was real." She met his eyes. "Then I fell in love with you. The real you. The one who stays up all night perfecting battery technology, who anonymously funds solar installations in low-income neighborhoods, who pretended to enjoy terrible punk music because it made me happy." "Why tell me now?" Churchill asked, his voice hollow. Everything felt surreal, like he was watching someone else's life implode. Amelia walked back to him, kneeling in front of where he sat on the bed. Because I couldn't start our marriage with this lie between us. Because you deserve the truth. Because I love you enough to risk losing you. She pulled a flash drive from her purse. This is everything. My FBI files, my resignation letter, all of it. I've been carrying it around for weeks, trying to find the courage to tell you. I understand if you want an annulment. Hell, you could probably have me arrested, though the statute of limitations— Stop, Churchill said, taking the flash drive. It felt heavier than its few grams should allow. Just stop. I need to think. He stood and walked to the minibar, pouring himself a scotch with shaking hands. His wife had been a federal agent. She'd investigated him, lied to him, made him fall in love with her all while knowing who he was. But she'd also quit her job rather than frame him. She'd told him the truth on their wedding night, when she could have kept silent forever. And despite everything, he still loved her. "Did your handler know you quit because you wouldn't frame me?" he asked finally. "No," Amelia admitted. "I told him I was burned out, that I couldn't do undercover work anymore." He was furious, said I was throwing away my career over bleeding heart liberal guilt. "If he knew I'd married you—" She shuddered. "Let's just say it wouldn't be good for either of us." Churchill downed his scotch in one burn. His analytical mind was already working through the implications, the potential threats, the ways this could destroy everything he'd built. But another part of him, the part that had fallen for a purple-haired bartender who told him to go to hell, was focused on something else entirely. "You gave up your career for your principles," he said slowly. "You chose truth over advancement. You risked everything to tell me tonight when you could have stayed silent." Amelia nodded, tears still flowing. "And you fell in love with me, thinking I was just an entitled rich asshole, not knowing about the bet that started all this." The words were out before Churchill could stop them. Amelia's tears stopped in confusion. What bet? And so Churchill found himself confessing his own truth about the poker game and the dare, and how what started as a joke had become the most real thing in his life. They sat in silence for a long moment, processing each other's revelations. Then Amelia started laughing. Not bitter laughter, but genuine, releasing tension. "So you married me because your friends bet you couldn't be spontaneous, and I married you while hiding that I'd investigated you for the FBI. We're quite the pair—" Churchill found himself laughing too, the absurdity of it all hitting him. "My lawyers are going to have heart attacks when they find out," he said. "Multiple heart attacks. Possibly strokes. We could still get that annulment," Amelia offered, though her eyes said she didn't want it. "We could pretend this never happened." Churchill set down his empty glass and crossed to his wife, pulling her to her feet. "I have a better idea. We stay married. We build a life together. We keep each other's secrets and create new ones. Because despite everything, or maybe because of everything, I can't imagine my life without you in it." Amelia searched his face. "You're not angry?" "Oh, I'm furious," Churchill admitted, "but I'm also impressed and grateful and completely, irrationally, in love with you. Besides," he added with a wry smile, "who else would I find who could match me for complicated origin stories?" "There's more," Amelia said quietly. "Things about my time with the FBI, about why they were so interested in you specifically. There's a conspiracy in the energy sector, Church. People who want to suppress clean technology to protect oil interests. They see you as a threat." Churchill's expression hardened. He'd suspected as much for years, but had never had proof. "Tell me everything," he said. So she did, and they talked until dawn, sharing secrets and truths and plans. By the time the sun rose over the Pacific, they'd moved from confession to collaboration, from betrayal to partnership. "So what now?" Amelia asked as they finally lay down, exhausted but somehow closer than before. "Now," Churchill said, pulling her against him, "we figure out how to save the world while staying alive. Together." She laughed against his chest. "Just another Tuesday for the Wests, then." "Exactly. Though first, we should probably consummate this marriage. Can't have the FBI or my board members claiming it's invalid." Amelia hit him with a pillow, but she was smiling. "Romantic as always, Mr. West." "You love it, Mrs. West." And despite everything, the lies, the bet, the danger ahead, he was right. She did. The next morning brought new challenges. Churchill woke to find Amelia already up, hunched over her laptop with the expression of concentration he'd seen when she was working on her art. "What are you doing?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Encrypting everything," she said. "If we're going to take on oil companies and potentially corrupt FBI agents, we need to be smart. Starting with securing all our communications." Churchill kissed her neck. "God, I love your criminal mind." "Former criminal mind," she corrected. "Now I'm just a concerned citizen married to a billionaire target." They checked out of the hotel separately, a precaution that seemed paranoid but necessary. Churchill's security team was good, but they'd been hired to protect him from standard threats: kidnapping, corporate espionage, the occasional environmental extremist. They weren't prepared for the possibility that government agencies might be compromised. "We need to upgrade everything," Amelia said, as they met at his Malibu estate. "Security, communications, personnel vetting. And we need to do it without raising suspicions." Churchill agreed, already mentally calculating the cost. "I know people. Private military contractors who've gone into corporate security. We can trust them." The first test came sooner than expected. 3 days after their wedding, Churchill's CFO called with concerning news. "Someone's been probing our systems," Margaret Liu reported. "Very sophisticated attacks, looking for specific information about our new battery technology. Our cybersecurity team traced it back to servers in Virginia before the trail went cold." Churchill met Amelia's eyes across his home office. Virginia meant government agencies, or someone wanting them to think so. "Double our cybersecurity budget," he told Margaret, "and implement the new protocols I'm sending you. Anyone asks, we're protecting against Chinese industrial espionage." "They're moving already," Amelia said after he hung up. "Someone must have noted our marriage, connected the dots. They're wondering if I told you anything." She chewed her lip, a nervous habit he'd noticed. "We need to give them something. A reason for our marriage that has nothing to do with my FBI past," Churchill considered. "The bet," he said finally. "We leak the story about the bet. Billionaire marries random bartender who told him off because of a dare from friends. It's ridiculous enough to be believable, humiliating enough that people will think it's true." The story hit the gossip blogs within 48 hours, carefully planted by Churchill's PR team. Billionaire's bet leads to beach wedding and West marries bartender after million-dollar dare dominated social media. The narrative was perfect. Eccentric billionaire makes impulsive decision. Rebellious artist profits. It explained their quick courtship and unlikely pairing while hiding the deeper truth. Amelia played her part perfectly, posting artistic photos of their honeymoon with captions about falling for the man behind the money. Churchill's friends, especially David, were furious about being portrayed as instigators, but they agreed to support the story. Behind the scenes, they worked systematically to understand the threat. Amelia used her FBI training to analyze patterns, identifying key players in what appeared to be a coordinated effort to suppress revolutionary energy technology. "It's bigger than just oil companies," she explained one night, surrounded by charts and graphs. "There are government officials, foreign interests, Even some environmental groups have been compromised. They've created a web of influence designed to maintain the status quo. Churchill studied her work with growing alarm. Several of his board members had connections to the suspected conspiracy. "We need allies," he said. "People inside the system who still believe in doing the right thing." Their first ally came from an unexpected source. Special Agent Diana Chen, Amelia's former partner, reached out through encrypted channels. "I know you're married to West," her message read. "I know you quit because of what you found. I'm still inside, and things have gotten worse. We need to talk." The meeting was arranged carefully. A public place with multiple exits, security watching from a distance. Diana looked older than her 35 years, stress etched in the lines around her eyes. "After you left, our handler went dark. Started pushing cases that made no sense, targeting clean energy companies exclusively. I did some digging. He's taking money from a shell company linked to Saudi oil interests." "Why come to us?" Amelia asked, though she was already calculating trust probabilities. Diana laughed bitterly. "Because you were right to get out. Because West is one of the few billionaires actually trying to change things. Because if we don't stop this, they'll suppress technology that could save the planet." She slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything I've gathered. Names, dates, financial transfers. Enough to start fighting back, if you're willing." Churchill pocketed the drive. "What do you want in return?" "Protection," Diana said simply. "And when this goes public, I want immunity for the agents who were just following orders they thought were legitimate." The data Diana provided was explosive. It revealed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government and industry, designed to slow the adoption of renewable energy by any means necessary. Churchill's company was a primary target because his battery technology threatened to make fossil fuels obsolete for power generation. "They were planning to frame you," Amelia said, reading through the files. "Plant evidence of environmental violations, create a scandal big enough to destroy your credibility and bankrupt the company." Churchill felt cold fury. He'd built West Energy Solutions to help save the planet, and these people were willing to destroy it for profit. "We need to be smart about this," Amelia cautioned. "If we go public too soon, they'll spin it as a conspiracy theory. We need irrefutable proof and media allies ready to run with the story." Churchill agreed, but he was already forming plans. "We use their tactics against them. Corporate espionage, but legal. We hire investigators to follow the money, lawyers to find the violations. We build a case so airtight that no amount of influence can suppress it." Amelia smiled. "Now you're thinking like a criminal. I'm so proud." Despite everything, he laughed. His rebellious wife was turning him into a revolutionary, and he found he didn't mind at all. The next months were a delicate dance. Publicly, Churchill and Amelia played the role of newlyweds, attending charity galas and posting carefully curated social media updates. Privately, they built a network of allies and gathered evidence. They recruited investigative journalists, reformed government officials, and international environmental activists. Amelia's strategic mind proved invaluable, her FBI training allowing her to predict and counter moves before their enemies made them. Churchill's resources and business acumen turned their defensive position into an offensive one. The first victory came when they exposed a mid-level EPA official who'd been suppressing reports on water contamination near oil refineries. The story broke nationally, leading to congressional hearings and the official's resignation. It was a small win, but it sent a message. The conspirators weren't untouchable. "They'll escalate now," Diana warned during one of their clandestine meetings. "You've drawn blood. They'll want to respond." She was right. 2 weeks later, Churchill's car was run off the road in what looked like an accident. He escaped with minor injuries, but the message was clear. "I'm scared," Amelia admitted that night, holding him tightly in their bed. "Not for me, but for you. Maybe we should stop, take the money and run. We could live anywhere, be anyone." Churchill kissed her forehead. "Is that what you really want? To run?" She was quiet for a moment. "No, I want to fight. I want to win. I want our kids to grow up in a world where doing the right thing doesn't make you a target." "Our kids?" Churchill asked, surprised. Amelia blushed. "Eventually. Assuming we survive this, we'll survive," he promised. "And we'll win. Because we have something they don't. We actually give a damn about the future." The war escalated over the following year. Every move they made was countered, every victory followed by retaliation. Churchill's stock price fluctuated wildly as anonymous reports questioned his mental stability and business practices. Amelia was doxxed online, her FBI history leaked selectively to make her look like a corrupted agent. But they persisted, their love for each other and their cause growing stronger under pressure. "You know what the irony is?" Amelia said one night as they reviewed security footage of their property. "If you hadn't made that bet, if I hadn't told you to go to hell, none of this would be happening." "True," Churchill agreed. "We'd also never have met, never have fallen in love, never have discovered this conspiracy. I'll take the danger if it means having you." She kissed him. "Smooth talker. No wonder I married you." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the conspirators, facing bankruptcy and criminal charges for unrelated crimes, offered to turn state's evidence in exchange for leniency. His testimony provided the smoking gun they needed: recorded conversations, financial documents, even assassination plans targeting Churchill and other clean energy leaders. "This is it," Diana said when she reviewed the evidence. "This is enough to bring them all down, but we need to move fast before they realize what we have." Churchill assembled his legal team, the journalists they'd cultivated, and their political allies. "We go public in 48 hours. Everything at once. Make it impossible to suppress or spin. Those 48 hours were the longest of their lives." Security was tripled. Amelia moved to a safe house, and Churchill conducted business from a secure location. They knew the conspirators would try something desperate, but they didn't know what. The answer came 24 hours before the reveal. A fake news story claiming Churchill had been arrested for tax evasion, complete with doctored photos and fabricated documents. It spread across social media like wildfire. "They're trying to discredit you before the story breaks," Amelia said over their encrypted line. "If people think you're a criminal, they won't believe your accusations." But they'd prepared for this. Within hours, Churchill's team had debunked the false story, and several news outlets ran pieces on the suspicious timing and obvious fabrication. The conspirators' desperation had backfired, making them look guilty before the real revelations even emerged. When the story finally broke, it was everything they'd hoped for and more. Major newspapers ran simultaneous exposes. Congressional leaders called for immediate investigations. The FBI announced a task force to root out corruption within its ranks. Several conspirators were arrested trying to flee the country. The oil companies' stock prices plummeted as investors realized the extent of their illegal activities. Churchill watched the coverage from his office, Amelia beside him. "We did it," she said, disbelief in her voice. "We actually did it." "No," Churchill corrected, pulling her close. "You did it. You had the courage to quit rather than be corrupted. You had the skills to expose them. You had the bravery to tell me the truth. I just provided resources." "Don't sell yourself short," Amelia chided. "You built a company worth targeting. You chose love over logic when you learned about my past. You risked everything to expose them. We did this together. They kissed as Churchill's phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, board members, and government officials. For now, they ignored them all. This moment was theirs. "So what now?" Churchill asked. "We've saved the world, or at least started to." What does a former FBI agent, turned artist, and a billionaire energy mogul do for an encore? Amelia grinned. "Well, we could start with actually having a honeymoon. Then maybe work on those kids we talked about. Save the world, raise a family, live happily ever after. You know, normal stuff." The aftermath was chaotic but satisfying. Dozens of conspirators were arrested. New regulations were passed to prevent similar corruption. Churchill's company's stock soared as investors realized West Energy Solutions was now unopposed in bringing revolutionary technology to market. Amelia was offered her FBI job back with a promotion, which she politely declined. "I'm done with that life," she told Diana. "Besides, someone needs to keep Churchill humble." Diana laughed. "Good luck with that. Though if anyone can do it, it's you." The two women had become genuine friends through the ordeal, bonding over shared danger and purpose. They finally took that honeymoon 6 months later, after the trials began and the immediate danger passed. Churchill surprised Amelia with a trip to New Zealand where they spent 2 weeks hiking, bungee jumping, and making love in a remote cabin with no cell service. "I could get used to this," Amelia said one morning. "Watching the sunrise over mountains. No conspiracies, no death threats, just us." Churchill pulled her back into bed. "We've earned some peace. Though knowing us, we'll be bored within a month." He was right. By the time they returned, both were eager to tackle new challenges. Amelia had started a non-profit teaching art to at-risk youth. Churchill was developing affordable solar technology for developing nations. They were, as she'd predicted, saving the world and building a family. The pregnancy came 2 years after their wedding. Amelia announced it in typical fashion, spray painting baby on board on Churchill's home office wall. He'd stared at it for a full minute before the meaning sank in, then swept her into his arms, laughing and crying simultaneously. "We're having a baby," he kept repeating. "We're actually having a baby, unless you'd prefer I arrest it for vandalism," Amelia teased, but she was crying too. They'd been trying for months, the stress of their ordeal having taken a physical toll. This felt like the universe's way of saying they'd earned their happiness. They had a son, Oliver, who inherited Churchill's analytical mind and Amelia's artistic soul. He was followed 2 years later by twins, Sophia and Marcus, who seemed determined to test every security measure their parents had installed. "We're outnumbered now," Churchill said one evening, watching their children play in the secured garden. 3-2. "They could take us—" Amelia laughed, paint in her hair from her latest project. "Good thing we taught them to use their powers for good," and they had. Their children grew up understanding that privilege came with responsibility, that art and science were equally valuable, and that sometimes telling someone to go to hell was the beginning of a beautiful love story. Years later, at Oliver's high school graduation, Churchill reflected on the path that had brought them here. The bet that had started as a drunken joke between friends had led to a marriage built on truth, danger, and deep love. Amelia caught his eye from across the auditorium and winked, still rebellious after all these years. He winked back, still amazed that she'd chosen him despite everything. "Dad's getting sentimental again," Sophia whispered to Marcus. "It's gross." But Oliver, wise beyond his years, just smiled. Let him be. He's remembering how he met Mom. "The bet story?" Marcus asked. "The real story," Oliver corrected. He was the only one of their children who knew the full truth, told to him on his 16th birthday. The one where love conquered conspiracy. It sounded like a movie plot, but it was their reality. Churchill's company eventually became the largest renewable energy provider in the world, powering entire nations with clean technology. Amelia's art graced museums and public spaces, inspiring new generations to see beauty in rebellion. Their marriage, born from a bet and tested by fire, became legendary in their circles. "How do you make it work?" younger couples would ask. "Simple," Churchill would say. "Marry someone who tells you to go to hell, then prove you're worth heaven." Amelia's answer was different but equally true. Marry someone who sees your worst secret and chooses to love you anyway. Together, they'd built an empire not just of wealth but of purpose, family, and unshakable partnership. The conspirators they'd exposed served long prison sentences. The energy industry transformed, embracing innovation instead of suppressing it. Diana Chen became director of a reformed FBI division focused on corporate crime. David Rothman, Churchill's best friend, liked to take credit for the whole thing. If I hadn't made that bet, he'd say at every opportunity, none of this would have happened. It annoyed Churchill, mainly because it was true. One stupid, drunken bet had changed the course of multiple lives and possibly saved the planet. On their 20th anniversary, Churchill and Amelia renewed their vows on the same Big Sur beach where they'd first married. Their children stood with them, along with friends who'd become family through shared trials. "20 years ago, you told me to go to hell," Churchill said in his vows. "Thank you for giving me directions to heaven instead." Amelia, never one for sentiment, had prepared equally touching words. "20 years ago, I investigated you for crimes you didn't commit. Sorry about that. Thanks for not pressing charges." The guests laughed, their children groaned, and Churchill kissed his wife like it was their first wedding all over again. "No regrets?" Amelia asked that night as they danced at the reception. "Only one," Churchill admitted. "I should have cut in line at more bars. Might have met you sooner." She stepped on his foot deliberately. "Ass. That's my husband, ladies and gentlemen. Still an entitled ass, just a lovable one now." But she was smiling as she said it, and he was smiling as he spun her, and their children were rolling their eyes at their parents' obvious affection. The bet had been for $5 million. What Churchill had won was priceless. A partner, a purpose, and a life that proved love could indeed conquer all, even international conspiracy. As the evening ended and their guests departed, Churchill and Amelia sat on the beach watching stars. "What do you think would have happened if I hadn't taken that bet?" he asked. "If you just waited your turn at the bar like a normal person," Amelia considered. "You'd probably be married to some socialite who spent your money and bored you to tears. I'd probably still be bartending and investigating corporate crimes. The world would be a darker place, literally, without your technology breakthrough." She paused. "But I like to think we'd have found each other anyway. Some forces are too strong to be denied." Churchill pulled her close. "Fate. Chemistry," she corrected. "The kind that makes things explode." They laughed, comfortable in their shared history and excited for their shared future. Their story became a case study at business schools, though the full truth remained classified. Students analyzed the public version. Billionaire marries bartender. Together they expose corruption and transform an industry. The real version, FBI agent falls for target, reveals conspiracy on wedding night. Couple saves world, remained known only to a select few. "Which version do you prefer?" Amelia asked Churchill once after guest lecturing at Harvard. "The truth," he said without hesitation. "It's more interesting, and it has you telling me to go to hell. That's my favorite part." "Mine too," she admitted. "Well, that and the part where you didn't have me arrested for investigating you." "Details," Churchill said, waving his hand dismissively. On quiet evenings, When their children were asleep and the world wasn't ending, Churchill and Amelia would sit in their garden and marvel at their journey. From a drunken bet to a dynasty built on clean energy and truth. From mutual deception to unshakable trust. From go to hell to I love you, and everything in between. "Would you do it again?" Amelia asked one such evening. The bet, the marriage, the conspiracy, all of it. Churchill didn't hesitate. Every single moment. Even the terrifying ones. Especially the terrifying ones. They led us here. Here was a life neither had imagined but both had fought for. A life where rebellious bartenders could become trusted partners. Where billionaires could become heroes. Where love could overcome lies and truth could triumph over conspiracy. The flash drive Amelia had given Churchill on their wedding night sat in a safe in their home, a reminder of how far they'd come. Sometimes Churchill would hold it, remembering the fear and anger he'd felt learning about her past. Now, it just seemed like another piece of their story. No more or less important than the bet or the investigation or the 1,000 moments that had built their life together. "I love you," he'd tell Amelia every morning, meaning it more each day. "Go to hell," she'd sometimes respond, but always with a kiss that said she loved him too. It was their thing, their callback to the beginning, their reminder that the best things in life often started with the worst first impressions. Their children grew up thinking this was normal. Parents who'd saved the world, exposed corruption, and built an empire on love and renewable energy. Only as adults did they realize how extraordinary their family story was. "So Dad married Mom because of a bet?" Sophia asked at one family dinner. "And Mom was secretly investigating Dad?" Marcus added. "And you exposed an international conspiracy on your wedding night?" Oliver finished. Churchill and Amelia exchanged glances. "Pretty much," Churchill said. "Though there were a few more explosions than you're imagining," Amelia added. Their children stared at them with new respect. "Our parents are badasses," Marcus whispered. "Language," Amelia chided, but she was smiling. In the end, the bet that had started everything became a family joke. David Rothman had framed the original napkin where he'd written the terms, presenting it to them on their 25th anniversary. $5 million for marrying someone who told you to go to hell, he read. "Best investment you never collected on," Churchill had laughed. "I got something worth more than money." "Several somethings," Amelia corrected, gesturing to their children and the life they'd built. "Though the money would have been nice too." "Mercenary," Churchill accused fondly. "You knew that when you married me," she shot back. "Former FBI agent, remember? We're all about the money." It was a lie, of course. She'd walked away from her career for principles. But the banter was part of their rhythm, their way of showing love. As their children started their own lives. Oliver in renewable energy like his father, Sophia in art like her mother, Marcus surprisingly in law enforcement like his mother's former career. Churchill and Amelia found themselves reflecting more on their journey. "Any regrets?" became their traditional anniversary question. The answer was always no, but the reasons evolved. No, because their love had saved lives through the technology they'd protected. No, because their children were extraordinary humans who would continue their work. No, because they'd found in each other not just love but partnership in the truest sense. No, because even the hard parts had led to something beautiful. "Tell us the story again," their grandchildren would eventually ask. The real story. And Churchill would start with a poker game and a drunken bet, while Amelia would interrupt to add details about her FBI investigation. They'd talk over each other, argue about sequences, laugh at memories that had once been terrifying. The children would listen with wide eyes, hardly believing their grandparents had lived such adventures. "Is it all true?" they'd ask. "Every word, Churchill would assure them. Even the part about Grandma telling you to go to hell. Especially that part, Amelia would confirm. It's the most important part. Sometimes the best things in life start with someone telling you exactly what you need to hear, even if you don't want to hear it. The legacy they left was more than clean energy or exposed corruption. It was proof that love could grow from the rockiest soil, that truth was stronger than deception, and that sometimes the best decisions looked like the worst ones at first glance. Churchill's company continued to innovate, now run by Oliver with the same principles his parents had instilled. Amelia's Art Foundation had programs in every major city, teaching rebellion and beauty in equal measure. The conspiracy they'd exposed had led to reforms that protected whistleblowers and promoted transparency. But their greatest legacy was their family, children and grandchildren, who understood that courage, love, and a willingness to tell powerful people to go to hell could change the world. On what would be their final anniversary together, 50 years after that fateful bet, Churchill and Amelia sat in their garden one last time. They were older, slower, but still very much in love. "No regrets?" Churchill asked, as tradition demanded. "One," Amelia said, surprising him. "I should have ordered you to the back of the line that night. Would have been funnier." He laughed, the sound still capable of making her heart skip. "I would have gone. Even then, something about you made me want to follow your orders." "Liar," she said affectionately. "You were an arrogant ass who needed to be taken down several pegs." "True," he agreed. "Lucky for me, I found someone willing to do the job." They held hands as the sun set, their life's work complete. Their love story ended as it began, with truth, laughter, and the understanding that sometimes the best things came from the worst beginnings. The funeral was attended by thousands. World leaders, environmental activists, former FBI agents, and ordinary people whose lives had been touched by the West's work. But the most moving tribute came from their children, who told the real story publicly for the first time. The bet, the investigation, the wedding night revelation, the conspiracy they'd exposed together. "Our parents taught us that love wasn't just about feeling," Oliver said. "It was about choosing each other, especially when the truth was hard. They showed us that rebellion and responsibility could coexist," Sophia added. "That art and science, passion and purpose, were not opposites but partners. They proved that doing the right thing was always worth it," Marcus concluded, "even when it meant risking everything." The world finally understood the full magnitude of Churchill and Amelia West's love story, how a billionaire's foolish bet had led to a partnership that literally saved the world. In the end, the $5 million David had bet seemed laughably small compared to what Churchill had won. A life partner who challenged and championed him in equal measure. A family that carried on their values, a legacy of environmental innovation and ethical business practices, and most importantly, the knowledge that love could indeed conquer all. Conspiracy, deception, and even terrible first impressions. The boy who'd built an empire on renewable energy, and the girl who'd told him to go to hell, had proven that the best love stories were the ones that started all wrong and ended up changing everything. Their gravestone, at Amelia's insistence, bore a simple inscription he cut in line. She told him to go to hell. They saved the world anyway. It was, everyone agreed, perfectly them. And that's the end of today's story. What lesson spoke to you the loudest? Drop your answer below. I can't wait to read them all. And remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're always here for our weekly stories. Until next time, stay blessed.